So welcome to another edition of the Mike Oldfield podcast, Discography podcast. We're back with Platinum, very important album for myself, and definitely a very important album in terms of the next years in Mike's discography as well. I think it's often been referred to as a transitional album. Not sure I agree with that, but it's definitely marks a new point of departure. Lots of changes, also still lots of references to the past. I think it's a great album to talk about for this episode.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's funny because I would say it's my most listened to album.
Really?
Yeah,
Funny because it's
since
mine too.
since the deluxe edition was released. Don't remember when that was, 2008, 2009 or something.
12, I thought, but okay.
I think it was. Maybe you're right. I don't know. But anyway, so for the last 10 years plus, right, I have been listening to this a lot. And in the past 4 years, like ever since my daughter was born, we listened to it even more.
That's really interesting.
Yes.
Because it's my most listened to Oldfield album as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine in Spain telling me a while ago that was like his gateway into Mike's work. And I agree, like it's really, if you and it's the first time I thought about that today is actually Platinum is definitely where the biggest change happened in his career. And then I was wondering, okay, because he was going from A to B, right? So then I was wondering, okay, did he ever go back to A, really? And when? And he did. He did at some point, like he went back doing Amarok, right? And then he did Tubular Bells 2, which is kind of like maybe a little bit of a step back into the old way of doing things, but that was with the production team and stuff, so not really. And then really it was in the mid-90s, I think it was Tubular Bells 3 and Guitars, where he really went back to working on his own and making all his own decisions and using less and less of external input.
Yeah,
because really that's like the biggest thing in his career, from going forward from 78, from Platinum, or 79 it was released, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That suddenly, he was working with other musicians. And even had other musicians contribute parts which are not credited. And so this is like, I say this like making assumptions, but I know, right? And it's really, really interesting to go from being like a total control freak, you could say, even though you don't have to kind of like call it that. It's not control freak. It's like out of necessity, he did everything himself, right? Until he then was able and decided to kind of open up to use a different process.
There's so many ways to start talking about this album. It's insane. This is maybe a good way. I mean, maybe just very briefly on a personal level, I think the reason is why I listened to this so much is because it caught me right in the middle of a phase where I was already listening to his music, and this I bought the original CD on our way to France. This was the last vacation I had with my parents, probably, and we were on our way to France, and I bought it at a petrol station. And they I hadn't taken a lot of music with me, and they had a stand with CDs, weirdly enough, and I bought it there, and I think it was the perfect music because not only my parents were happy that it wasn't the usual stuff I would listen to, which was a lot of early 80s Klaus Schulze with all these atonal and avant-garde influences and really weird computer beats. And so this was, I think it was more compatible as much as it was still really challenging. And then secondly, we were always on the move on this vacation. There was a lot of driving, and I think it fits the music, which is also a lot about rhythm and groove. So I think it caught me at the right moment, and I had listened to, I think it was really on Tubular Bells and Hergest Ridge, and it was very different but still recognizable. So there was an element of confusion, maybe. A lot of people, I think, experienced it when they first heard it as fans. If you enter into his world with this album, then there's no problem at all, I think. But there's this movement, there's this change, and I don't know, and it kept me coming back to it. And every time I hear it, I hear something different in it. I experience it differently. I mean, I have my issues with it, but that too, in a way, I think makes it more intriguing to me. But yes, as you say, I think he's starting to work with musicians, and I think to a degree what he said about this is that I don't know if he was actually referring to this, but I have my assumption is that before he did the therapy, he basically worked through his issues through the music, and then I think after that he said, well, I became a different person, and there were a lot of the crises I had in my life were gone. So I had to look for crises, and
I don't know. I heard some other interview with him actually yesterday, in which was from the Songs of Distant Earth era, and he says there he says that he was afraid that he would lose his creativity when he tackles his psychological problems, but actually it turned out that was not the case.
No, it was not the case.
He said that the motivation for why he would make music changed, but his creativity didn't change.
I do think that there's lots of contradictions in the interviews, but I could sort of recognize the fact that with this album, the album came. So once he did the therapy, he goes out to tour. He does interviews. He starts working with other musicians. All the things he really did not want to do before. It's a completely different process. So I do see an element of going into uncomfortable territory, growing as a person and as a musician. I think it's sort of like flying. He had his fear of flying. What does he do? He starts learning to fly solo. I think that's so. It shows that he's really the kind of person who will. He the book is called Changeling for a reason. I mean,
exactly. He doesn't really explain it in the book, right?
No, he doesn't. But I think the thing is he faces his demons.
Yeah, that's what he said in that.
That's why these comments from some of the people around him saying that he should never have done the therapy because there was something in him that disappeared. I mean, that is so unfair because there's so much coming after it.
I mean, it really is bullshit. I have to use that word. Yeah, I mean, so what is special about this album? There are 2 cover songs on it.
Yes.
Right, the last song of the first side and the last song of the second side.
And there were more recorded prior to the album, so there could have been more. There was this "All Right Now" by
Yeah. Was that before? I'm not exactly sure.
As far as I know, it was recorded as part leading up to it. But okay.
Yeah, I don't know about this. So yeah, but you're right. There was "All Right Now" that was covered. Like he was a big fan of the song. And but I mean, so here's another thing that I only found out, again, like this last week. I saw somebody posting a copy of North Star, the album by Philip Glass.
Yes.
Right? And so the part 4 of Platinum is a cover of a section of North Star.
Yeah, the opening movement.
Yes. And so did you know that album was actually released on Virgin?
Yeah, he apparently the story is that he told Branson to sign Glass for Virgin.
Really?
Yeah, that's. I mean, a lot of from this period is sort of via. Someone saying something about what happened. But yes, I heard that he apparently tried to. He persuaded Branson to sign him.
Wow, I had no idea that's a big thing.
That's a big thing, yeah.
That's very big. And that was that was in 77, I think, maybe.
Yeah, very, 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 very close in time. There's so much happening.
So there you go. Like that also gives even more meaning to what we were saying in the Incantations podcast, right? Like it kind of puts that into context now as well. Wow. Wow, that's intense.
And it's a fantastic album also. Even though the interesting thing to me also is that there were lots of influences in his albums prior to Platinum. And in the book he explains these, and some of them are very concrete, but they're never singled out. And suddenly here he gives credit to Glass on a piece. I mean, almost everything that makes the fourth part, which makes North Star great on Platinum, is by Mike.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have arranged it in a way that you would never hear that it was originally a Glass piece.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't tell people, they don't know.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the vocals, and
Then
you wouldn't
left.
know. Yeah, exactly.
But he wants to give tribute. That is so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And again, like the cover version of I Got Rhythm, which is sort of like half speed, but even less than half speed. It's just incredible. It's such a moving piece of music, and something that he didn't. I don't think he ever went back to something like that, except for the last song on the album, "Man on the Rocks," which I can't even remember the title right now, but like sort of like a gospel-y kind of. I Give Myself Away. It's called. And so to really kind of like just take somebody else's music and interpret it in a very how should I say this? Like using a magnifying glass.
Yeah. Sorry, no, that's my watch.
Ah, that was your watch. Okay. Like a magnifying glass. I think that's such a cool approach for a cover, right? And where North Star is sort of like, okay, like here's the structure. Take exactly the same structure, and which is a minimal piece. So right, and then on top, I play like a stacked, like, I don't know, 4-part rhythm guitars and bass, and then I compose a melody on top of it.
Yep.
And
I think I was reminded of this when I saw what's his name? The guy from the German label called Kanzleramt, and the guy running it. Can't remember the name now, but he was very important for me because he made a music in the 90s which I sort of dreamed of. So there was techno, but it was also musical, and there were harmonies in there without it being this cheap brand of trance. And he said he was going to the clubs in Frankfurt, and they were playing this incredibly stripped down kind of techno. But when he came into the clubs, he instantly could hear the harmonies on top of it. And I imagine it's sort of that. You take a music which is stripped down to the bare bones, and then as a musician, because a lot of this music is made by non-musicians. Of course, Blas was a composer, but I can imagine that he hears the Glass music, and then his brain can't stop there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's so cool because like I think everything kind of like fits together very well, like historically with this record. So he went from doing everything by himself.
Yeah,
which is not entirely true on Incantations. Obviously, he had to have people help him, and the strings, and flute players, stuff like that. But the this utter change, going from the one side to the other side of the equation in a way, using all those session musicians, going to the other side of the planet. Not quite, but to New York to record, to have there are like 5 different bass players listed on the recording session, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. There are barely 5 pieces on there. Yeah. If you think about it that way, and Mike is playing some of the bass.
I'm sure.
So it's kind of interesting to see like that the whole approach changed, the musical approach changed. There are these cover songs. There is there are actual songs on there also. we're going to talk about that later, like Sally, I'm Just a Gorilla, the original song that was on the album,
Yeah.
which then became into Wonderland. It's a completely different song. And also, as you say, like this rhythm-based concept, which I think is something that, again, a lot of people don't get.
Yeah.
That is his swing album. That is the album where it's the triplety album.
Yeah.
Right? And so, and this is kind of like very cool for those who are interested in this kind of nerdy stuff. The first part, Airborne, is really so wacky because it has a 16th grid and a triplet grid going on at the same time. And I mentioned that before in some, like talking about, even in Tubular Bells, it does that. But here it's like, it's so cool. And like, when you just listen to it, you don't realize it. It's only when you start trying to play it, you realize, come on, what's going on? So the initial riff, which is a variation of Tubular Bells, I have to say that. And if you listen closely, you can even hear the glockenspiel played in the background. And it goes between A minor and G major, just like the beginning of Tubular Bells, same key center even at the beginning. And then this rhythm-based idea, right, which kind of like carries through the whole piece. And also he does these things that he did on Incantations, where he had like cyclic repetitions of motifs. So where it's like 3 repeats on top of an 8-bar phrase or something. And he does that here as well. If you listen closely, you hear that the hi-hat patterns, for example, they are sometimes 6 beats long. But it's a 4-beat song in 4, right? And stuff like that. And then on the second on the second side, especially into Wonderland, it's kind of like a almost like a 1920s show tune.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't know if you agree, but that's
totally.
sort of like yeah. And then
it's retrofuturistic, sort of, because it is recreating it with synths, but it has a very nostalgic
exactly
mood about it.
Yeah, and the vocals, the way the vocals are arranged, and it's just incredible. And it's just to sort of make that happen as the artist, I think that's really where he went with this album. So going from just playing the instrument, he really went to, and let me, if I'm phrasing this carefully, he went to playing the players. So, I mean, if it was conscious or like whatever, it doesn't matter how, but it kind of happened, right? That this music came together, and like into Wonderland, the beautiful solo in the middle, what sounds like a flute synth solo. Actually, the first half of it is actually composed, because if you listen closely, you hear the guitar playing the exact same thing, but sort of like in a rhythm guitar part there, you hear the melody of the flute. And now it's funny because he did something like that on Incantations, similar things, but here I think that very part even is probably not him playing guitar, but it's Nico Ramsden playing guitar.
Yes. I was going to talk to you because that is what you say is exactly what my feeling about this is. If you watch the live clips, and there are many live clips from 1979 until 1983 or 1984, where he plays these pieces, and the guitar solo pieces, he usually does not play them. It's actually someone else in the band playing them. He's usually playing either rhythm guitar or bass.
Yes.
Towards the mid 80s, he's playing the bass more. So my impression is that really he sees the music as emanating from the rhythm, and he sees the rhythm as, if the rhythm isn't right, then the music doesn't work. So he has to take care of the rhythm, and he trusts the musicians to be able to play the guitar.
I mean, the rhythm, it's so obvious. I think we talked about that as well already. Is that exactly, if you watch the live performances and you see him getting like a sour face, usually happens not when there is a wrong note, but it happens when the tempo isn't right. That's sort of like, you can really see that he knows how important that is for his music, the rhythm, the timing of things, right? You're absolutely right. And you said like, the music is coming from the rhythm, but also like from that point on, it's coming from the player.
Yes.
So this is so cool. So like going from like the total hermit kind of thing to, okay, like I'm utilizing in a positive way, utilizing my friends. And like the way that it worked, like this is also kind of interesting to know. A lot of the people he worked with, he met in you know, in a regular context, like in a pub, or you know, he saw them play with other bands and then started talking with them, or even somebody who was working at a studio. And then because I recently heard an interview or a talk that Phil Beer gave. Phil Beer was on the Exposed tour, where they basically they got to know each other, and Phil was a technician.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's kind of interesting, like that once you open up to have like other people being part of your world and creating, you come up with like these really particular results, right? And this is something I do have to say. So, sorry, Tobias. When people say that the first 4 albums are the greatest, which I kind of agree, right? But going back to what he says, calling his book Changeling, right? What happens is that from that point on, from like going from Incantation to Platinum and continuing through at least 15 years, each album is unique. And I say this like, you always recognize it's Oldfield, you do. But if you analyze it on a musical level, it's always something completely different. Like suddenly using a musical mode that he's never used before, right? Which happens on 5 Miles Out, for example, on that record, right? Like using a chord he's never used before. Like there are no dominant 7th chords in like 99.9% of his music, for example, right? So and he always kind of like keeps a little door open by not using something to actually use it later on. And this is also kind of like happening here. So what would you say? What are the influences here on this album? So I would say, like, in addition to, like, we already talked about the disco music influence on Incantations.
Yes.
And this continues here.
Yes.
Then the swing thing that I said, Charleston, like the part 3 is called Charleston.
Yes.
Minimal
music.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to discount Woodhenge. I think you could say sort of there was this proto-ambient sort of thing, but I think Woodhenge really comes from somewhere else. And
well, we know that it's from like 76 or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Punkadiddle, I don't think punk. I don't know.
It's not a punk piece, but it's a statement about punk music in a way.
I find it hard to really single out the references per se, because I think if the live performances, they have this feeling of jazz rock. There's this, and he's referred to it as jazz rock. I just don't think that jazz nor jazz rock in any way were an influence on this. I don't think so.
No. It's just because the band that he used was a jazz rock band, which was Pierre Molin's Gone. So, and that's how that influenced, and he liked that music. And we should not forget, and I actually did forget mentioning that when we talked about Incantations, that he worked with, like actually his sister and Mike worked with Pekka Pohjola on the, whatever it's called, because there's so many titles to that album. Incredible album. And the solo Mike plays on the title track has the Incantations elements in it, and it's a jazz, kind of what you would call jazz rock album, but a European jazz rock album.
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of agree. It's kind of like part of the mix of styles or approaches on this record, but it really only comes through in a short section. Like I think it's like maybe the second half of the title track that is the most jazz rock in terms of chords and stuff. Like it's really and I mean the funny thing is, and like that very tune, the second half of the title tune, is something that on the Incantations box that is one of the bonus tracks that's called Piano Improvisation. Right, so there you see, okay, like on the record, it's kind of like arranged like a jazz rock tune, but comes from a piano improvisation.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's really, really amazing.
There's one influence, not maybe on Platinum, but on Guilty and Incantations, which I thought was interesting looking back, and I didn't notice this for many years. I just now, but because I was spending so much time with it, the main melody of the opening section of Incantations, which returns in Guilty at the beginning. This is actually the theme of Trans-Europa Express by Kraftwerk.
Yes, yes.
So this has never. I don't think it's ever been mentioned. I always thought, wow, this is really familiar, but yes, it's.
But it's very not. It's inverted.
Yeah, it's not.
But it's fourth in Kraftwerk, I think, and it's like fifth to the fourth, and so it's very similar.
Here,
yes.
the funny thing is, this could be a coincidence because we're not talking about something which they invented. It's really like there is something. This is basic, but the piece Conflict on QE2 reuses goes back to that, but the beat underneath that actually makes the sound of a train rolling. I don't think there's a very clear reference to Trans-Europa Express.
Yeah, but you hear that fourth movement there exactly. You're absolutely right, and so, I think all of this is related.
And of course, then after Platinum, there comes the drum machine, the vocoder, and so on. I don't know if it's an explicit reference, but I think he's listening to a lot. I think that is the interesting thing. He's listening. There's so many ideas,
Yeah, like the listening aspect. I think that's also like from the Phil Beer thing that I heard. Phil Beer said that Mike was a big fan of these flat speakers, which were, I can't remember what they're called, quads, I think. Like flat speakers that had a really amazing resolution, which was like in the 70s, like the most hi-fi thing you could get.
Yeah.
And that they actually on the Exposed tour, they tried to use those because Mike was used to listening to those speakers to classical music. That's what Phil Beer said. Interesting to see that, like the listening aspect or the home hi-fi, say, was something that kind of was present for Mike. So I'm kind of like totally with you that maybe he was just really, really soaking up music from different cultures. And I mean, like obviously, like he already, like with Omadon, like he was already there, as like some people call it, like the first world music album. Yeah. Again, which doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean. And so, like, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's just there are a lot of influences there, and I think in order to realize this maybe half-baked vision that he might have had, I think it probably was only half-baked, but he had a concept. Yep. Use the engineers that Philip Glass used at the time, right? Work with those guys. Go to what was it? I don't know. Was it Electric Ladyland?
Yeah.
Right. Like Electric
Lady.
So like is it those like kind of like choose the people that you work with, and then work with that and see what comes out of it.
I think it's we often think about the transition from the 70s to the 80s as a sort of a fin de siècle and a sort of like this 1st of January 1980 it starts a new era, and there is so much for that because Klaus Schulze, he records this monumental live album called Live, which is him and a drummer and essentially classic 70s analog recording. Then Digit, the first album in 1980, is all digital. And then Tangerine Dream goes from Force Majeure, which is really a progressive rock setup still, and they were touring arenas. They were never as big as that again. And then the first album of the 1980s is Tangram, composed of much shorter episodes, and again, more digital, more melodic. Yes, goes from Tomato to Drama with vocoders, Trevor Horn, supposedly who invented the 80s. Even Kraftwerk, Die Menschmaschine, for all of its futuristicness, it's actually a 70s album. And Computerwelt in 1981 so there's a lot of it to be said. And then OMD released their first album in 1980, Depeche Mode in 1981. Yeah. But I think this is really a classic case of like you're looking at history, like we weren't there, and I think in reality the 70s continue through the 80s, and I think Mike he was dissatisfied with punk and what's happening there, and I think that this is a way of taking the music he loves and continuing it for a long time, and I think that's fantastic. Again, like many of the stuff that Kraftwerk did, the visionary stuff was done in the 70s, and it's like they were anticipating something which will come later, but it's still the 70s.
Yes, and it's visionary is such a strange word in a way, because like obviously when you do it, you basically it's never visionary because it's always in the now. Like you're like deciding now to use that sound or to record it in that way or whatever. So like you're saying, like the 70s continued. It's very true. I think they continued through till the end of 82. And in 83 is when like the big change happened in how records sounded. I mean, there's still a big change even between like 78 and 80, like those. But I think really we're fully in the 80s in 83.
Okay.
And obviously, like, I don't know when, like, for example, stuff like Take On Me, Aha, or something like that was released. Or Tears for Fears, like 84, 85 or something like that, right? When they had the very big hits. So I think that's when like the music had changed a lot, the technology had changed a lot, but everything that went up to like the end of 82 approximately, that was still very much the foot in the 70s. And this is interesting, like Platinum in a way is kind of like, and I'm saying it, more old-fashioned than Incantations.
Yeah.
It's more like, because with Incantations there was like just this idea to do something unique or whatever. Like I don't care, right? Or I don't know. I don't know where I'm pulling my references from. But here, with Platinum, it was more like, okay, I choose that studio because I choose those musicians because they, Rick Laird played with Mahavishnu Orchestra, or I don't know, like he must have chosen people.
Yeah, that's true. And even the American version of Platinum, Airborne, is a double album with live performances, right? And so, so that is a very 70s idea, I think. The combination, like Pink Floyd did this. You often have the live section and the studio version.
Yeah. Exactly, and there's I haven't listened to those in a long time, but I think even like Incantation is a mix of the studio version and the live version. It's very interesting.
I mean, this is maybe goes to the heart of it, but I'm really curious about two things, because it goes into the direction we're talking about. So one, do you prefer Airborne to Platinum, where they they swap out Guilty for Woodhenge? And why do you think that the deluxe edition inspired you to listen to it so much more? Because I suppose there's something in there that made you revisit it.
I don't know. It was just that it clicked with me again. So I mean, I always loved it, but it was just fascinating to hear it with a different master, I think.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just, to me, like, it's such a, like people would say, incoherent album, because it's not. I think it's not at all.
It's colorful.
But it's colorful, but also, and this is what's beautiful about the cover, is genius.
Yes.
Right? Like the butterfly on a whatever, it's like mercury, right? A drop of mercury or something. And that's what it looks like.
In the moonlight.
Yes. It's just genius. It's just so kind of like it always also makes the music have that color somehow for me.
Like me too.
Like in particular with this album, like it's really kind of like a piece of art.
The second side more than the first, maybe even.
Yeah. And like remember like the inner sleeve had a great photograph of him, of his face, like close-up of his face. I don't know if you've ever seen that with a like kind of a little bit of a stubble and like.
Didn't they use that for the new edition? I think they did.
I don't know about that, but it's just such a like, and they use some sort of two-tone printing with blue and silver or something. It looks amazing, and yeah, it's sort of like a very much a piece from of the time. Also, and I mentioned that before, Punkadiddle, I think, is the first time that there was a use of a drum loop, like a, you know, not a digitally sampled, but an actual drum loop. And I think that track was Tom Newman was also involved in this album.
Yeah, he's mentioned in the credits.
Yes, so maybe Woodhenge and I think Punkadiddle. It's interesting. Like
by the way, I did the cover. I think it's very easy to say it doesn't fit because it's so moody and the music is upbeat and well, it does have different moods, but it's not exactly sort of melancholic. But I think the thing is, the butterfly is a beautiful metaphor for the album because the butterfly is also airborne, and I think it's a very subtle and much more subtle reference than with the American cover. And I think it's the butterfly is like playful. It's really fragile. It doesn't live for long. It's fragile, but it has an incredible will. And I think what it also has is this trust. Even though it is so fragile, a butterfly is not afraid. Like every insect, you will, as soon as it senses motion coming towards it, it will disappear. But the butterfly will gladly sit on your shoulder, on a human's shoulder, and spend time with you. You know, it's
yeah, amazing. But you know, like it goes even further than the symbolism here. I think it's amazing. So basically, the butterfly gets caught in a molten tubular bells. In a bell that's molten, you could see it as that. Isn't that amazing?
I'm actually not ruling. I think that is very likely. Actually, yeah. No,
yeah, because it's a sort of like a simple. Okay, I'm going to take the tubular bells and we're going to liquefy it and we're going to, turn it into something else. And as you know, the tubular bells, the instrument. I mean, when I say tubular bells, the instrument does not appear on the first side, but it appears on the second side twice, in the first track and in the last track. And funnily enough, like really as the climax of the cover song. Yeah. I Got Rhythm. It's an amazing use of tubular bells there. Right?
And of course there's the transformation that a butterfly goes through from until it's a butterfly.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. I always love the cover, and I agree. To me, it has the same effect of putting me in, witnessing the color when I listen to it. Very, very effective. I think it would have experienced it very differently with the Airborne cover, which is green.
Yes.
And more sort of.
It's a digital piece of. It's Ian Eames, right? I think.
I don't know who did it.
It's the guy who did the visuals, the videos at the time, which was like a combination. Well, I think it was mostly animation, and he did like, I don't know. Does it say anything there?
No.
But I don't know. Like well, it would like you can Google it yourself.
Yeah.
Like
but I think also the last cover done by Trevor
Key.
Trevor Key, right? Yeah. I think it's the last cover he did for him.
Yeah, and I think like now with all the information we have, it's a very symbol rich thing.
So that was a great collaboration between the two. I think because I doubt that I would doubt that Mike had sort of this would have had suggested it to him explicitly. It's like the Tubular Bells. I think. That cover also, like the juxtaposition of the bells with the sea and the ocean, I think that really was a graphic idea. But I think it's someone clearly who senses something in the music and then translates that into the visual play.
And hey, here's another thing. Remember that the original idea for like Opus One or Breakfast in Bed, or whatever it was called, Tubular Bells.
Breakfast with Bread.
Yeah, Breakfast in Bed, I think it was.
Yeah.
But anyway, and that the cover that and this would be interesting to find out, but if it was Trevor Key, Heavens Open, the cover with the egg, that was the idea. The egg with blood coming out of it was the idea, actually, original idea for the Tubular Bells cover. And like again, like we have the drop of liquid here. So I like, I mean, we're getting off the rails here a little bit, but I think it's just funny to talk about these things this way somehow, you know.
And of course, the visuals, I mean, the shows he was playing weren't that big on visuals, but I think there were sort of, some of them did use animation. I think there's this one where he has the Escher.
Exactly,
ground,
that's Eames who did those, I think.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Because those
and
were
also the shore with the surf going in and out, and that is the cover of Airborne, I think.
We'll have to look it up.
Yeah. But anyway, that's yeah.
I've always thought is that because I love Guilty so much, and I've always thought it would have made for a great piece on the album. So I was wondering whether you have a preference for.
Yeah, no, I definitely love it the way it got released. But then I have to say, I never experienced it the way it got released with Sally, I'm Just a Gorilla on it.
So you don't have a copy.
And actually, and so like when people say that it's incoherent or doesn't like not release no side A and side B, they have nothing much to do with each other. That's absolutely wrong, because the themes of Airborne, after the intro or the first section of Airborne, like those themes reappear in Sally, I'm Just a Gorilla. And the whole song is based around those interesting kind of like, again, quarter harmony kind of riffs.
I think it's an unlucky thing. I really think there was I suppose, because I know there's lots of misunderstandings.
But I don't know anything about this, by the way, so maybe you can...
Yeah, I think, so maybe let me just preface this by something that in an interview Mike said, where he talked about, he was asked the communication with the musicians, and he said it is difficult to translate what I think to the musicians. So I will have to tell them, think of it like a work song, and then they'll know what I mean. But these are some of the greatest musicians of the era. So clearly there's an issue with communication. If it's an issue with them, it has to be difficult. And I think the story is that Branson probably didn't even hear the music. He just read the lyrics of Sally and said, "This is no way this is going to be on the album." And he, whatever he communicated or said, he said, "This, I don't want this on the album." And then effectively Sally was removed and replaced with Into Wonderland, which is, there are elements of Sally in that song. So I think he could have probably just resolved this by recording new lyrics.
Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense with that song. I don't think so, because the song it's like this whimsical love song, which probably Sally here is Sally Cooper, which was his second wife, or something like,
or third, discounting the 1 6-week marriage or something.
I don't know, but she was the woman that he had his first 3 children with. Okay, and so it's kind of like I to me it's a very moving piece of music. It's clearly kind of like he kind of like shows that in terms of, like you say, communication and relationship, he's very much sort of like a teenager or looking for it, and the lyric is amazing.
Well, we'll have to disagree on this one, but I mean, in
the sense of kind of conveying this, like the way that they are, like maybe you say they're shitty, but then they are kind of like that way for a reason. I
think the thing is, it's someone opening up completely.
Yes.
For it to be on an album like this, I think it's you have to. Well, it's, I don't know. I'd have trouble opening myself up so completely to say something like that. I think it's very. I don't know if it's courageous. It's just putting it out there.
It's honest.
It's honest. It's completely
authentic.
It's honest and authentic.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I think it makes for great music. Just I can see why, but again, maybe he should have fought for it.
Yeah. But you see, like, even this, I mean, you don't like the first 4 lines of this give me goosebumps.
Yeah.
If you, like, isn't it good to know you only get one go? And give me a key and let me see, try and act normally.
Yeah, I don't have any, my problem is more with the gorilla in Manila.
Yeah, okay, but yeah. But that's the comedy part of it.
You know,
It's like Don Alfonso.
yeah.
And Don Alfonso actually has the same kind of theme.
I think the thing is, I've listened to this album so often in this constellation. I don't even know if I'm qualified to sensibly talk about it anymore. Some of the transitions I don't think are great, but they work for me because I can't even say, is it me because I've heard them too often? Do I, you know? And it's the same with this one because I haven't really ever heard the album in context with the Sally piece.
Yeah, this is important to know, right? So what the intro into what feels like an intro into Punkadiddle,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Actually, in reality, is the end
Yeah.
of
Sally.
Sally, I'm Just a Gorilla, right? And it completely ties the two sides together.
Yeah.
Completely does, like
The-
thematically.
the evolution that song goes through from the beginning, where the voice is goes through this telephone effect.
Yeah.
And then there's the beautiful guitar solo, because you mentioned the beautiful keyboard solo in Into Wonderland, but the guitar solo of Sally is incredible. And then
that's Mike
yeah,
playing. Like it's a very, very personal song. Also the bass guitar on that, on I'm Just a Gorilla, I'm almost 100% sure is Mike.
I would assume, yes.
Yeah, you can hear that tone, you know. But anyway, like, it's like the cool thing is, like, also in terms of production, it's sort of kind of like a ridiculous album in a way. Like the sounds are, like the balances are very much of the time. So like how, like it's the loudest, like the softest song has the loudest kick drum. Right? I Got Rhythm has that super loud kick drum, and it's really cool and gels in an amazing way to me, like these sounds, and it's kind of wacky. I mean, he managed to do that quite a few times in his career, to kind of like make this really odd pastiche, right, of sounds. But here it's really I don't know. To me, it's a fascinating album, and I'm really happy that is the first album where he kind of like breaks out of the mold. Yeah.
I think it's an album which invites me, maybe a lot of other people as well, to kind of try and rearrange it, because there's definitely passages which don't feel, and coming from the live performances, which are fantastic. I sometimes think the first side, I sometimes wish for the first side it would have been produced more like the live versions, but there is no doubt that he wanted this album to be the way it is. You know, that this Tubular Bells, he's gone back to it because he was dissatisfied with certain aspects about it. He re-recorded it entirely in 2003, and he's performed it live again and again, and he's stated that some of the things he wasn't happy with. But I think Platinum, whatever it is, this is exactly what he wanted. I think he must have thought about it a lot. There's a German TV interview which mentions that the sound, so the what's it called? Like before a gig they would sound check for up to 4 hours.
Yes. Yeah.
Like insane, like 4 hours. So I think he was sort of trying to get a studio perfection on stage.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the album. I don't think for a second that anything was left up to chance. And I think the album sounds the way it sounds. And this is what he wanted, and it's great.
Hey, so like what is like totally unique about this record too is that you have the like the musicians, and I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's Pierre Merlin actually who's whispering.
Yeah.
Like, so he's talking over sections, right?
Yeah.
Like and where you have like the male doo-wop vocals as the reprise of the Platinum theme, and the female doo-wop vocals on Into Wonderland. and so this idea, because you were talking about live music and studio music, so this idea that like if you're sitting in a jazz club listening to a band and the leader says, okay, let's go back to the head of the tune or something, like you hear that, you can see that, and it's a little bit like we spoke about that earlier, ASMR in a way, that record.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yes,
That's true.
It has those elements.
That's very interesting, because there's within the first 5 or 6 seconds, there's a tiny sound in the background. I've always thought it was just pure sound, but there is actually people who say, no, there's something being said there, and it's something like kid stuff.
Okay.
Listen to it back, I can sort of.
So what I heard is platinum.
Yeah, lots of people think it's platinum. They're saying it's kid stuff, sort of because the chords are so simple, or because it's so familiar. I've always thought it was sort of a sound, just like a simple sound effect. But it does mean that there's up to the granular level, it's sort of it's suffused with meaning on a different level, like not just thematic but also sonic.
No, I agree. Like there are really like interesting details that like 3 come to mind for me. So first of all is the transition from Charleston to North Star, which is actually a bass synth note, right? Which is kind of like the bass synth note leading into is sort of it's an inversion basically of the chord that's happening at the time. It's very unusual for Mike. But in a way, like the way it works is like this step into this new world, because you could say, okay, it's just copy and paste, not copy and paste, but like splicing of different recordings, which it is. But you can see that there is like still very much of a concept of how these 4 parts on side 1 kind of like belong to each and work with each other, and then the last note of North Star, which is not a chord tone, like. I mean, this is super nerdy stuff, but anyway, like, you know, you have that synth flute hanging over at the end with a note that's not a chord tone. Kind of like cool to say, okay, we're going to continue. This is not over, right? Like we haven't come to an end. And this is maybe like one of the details that really speaks for your theory here, is that at the end of Into Wonderland, he gets that endless sustain, a sustained note. I haven't ever checked. I would say it's maybe 20-30 seconds long, just that one held note, and it ends on that major tonality, right? That song is in major, and so it's held that long, and then he slides the finger down on his fretted guitar, right, and just to kind of like end this piece. So it's a very, very, very definite ending of the song. It's not a fade out or anything, but it's just that one last note that he holds for many seconds. Then he slides down, and at that moment, everything kind of like goes. I'm just saying it because like goes minor. It kind of like goes like for the last moment of the album. It goes from that bright majory note into something darker, and just by that little slide at the end, and it's always left. It was always so fascinating to me. Like how do you get an endlessly sustained note, right? And then you could say, okay, maybe it's done with tape loop or something, right? But then you realize, no, it's actually played because he plays the end of the note. And so the attention to detail, like you say, like it's very, he really knew what he wanted to do, and I know that there are people out there that are crazy about finding symbolism in things, and also in Mike's music, and artwork for that matter, but here it really makes sense. Yeah, like you're absolutely right. Like especially if you compare it to what comes after. With Q2, it seems much more lighter, in a way, like the music and the approach, and like it doesn't seem, it's still conceptual, but it's not that interrelated anymore
Yes.
as it is on this record.
Even though, well, we'll talk about that next time, because QE2, I think, for me, is one of the underappreciated albums.
I absolutely love that album
I think,
too.
yeah,
Yes.
I adore that one.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
I think you said you know a bit about the input of the musicians. I would be curious, because there's it would seem to me that the musicians play like a huge role, alone in the fact if you compare the live performances and you have different drummers, for example.
Yeah.
Like someone like Simon Phillips plays it very differently than you have different, like, I actually love what he does, but it's very, very different.
It's very different. Yeah, I mean, like the 84 version is really, for me, is not like the 84 tour, Discovery tour, was very different because they used a sequencer, like a backing track, you could say, which was the Fairlight computer. And so the whole thing was very different. You had those, like, what we would now call 8-bit sounds.
Yeah.
Maybe they were 12-bit, I don't know. But anyway, it was kind of like not... And that kind of like also influenced how Simon Phillips was playing. So Simon Phillips is, I think, in a way, an interesting name to mention here, because he's sort of the drummer who, for me, even though he was very popular and started playing in the 70s, he was very young in the 70s, but was very successful already. He sort of, for me, is the sound of a modern drummer. Where Pierre Merlin, for example, is sort of like has the sound of the timeless drummer. I'm sorry, Simon, like just like here. So I love Simon Phillips drumming, but Simon Phillips drumming sounded futuristic, even in the 70s, and then especially in the 80s.
And of course, Moulin was also a composer himself, which is also very 70s,
and a
60s.
And a percussionist,
Yeah.
playing melodic instruments, right? So it's very, very different. And yeah, I agree. So the input of the musicians, well, we have to kind of like talk about, the live performance, that those were after the fact. They came after the recording of the album, right? So what we have on the deluxe edition is one of the studio sessions for the title track. And actually, you can see that it's still in embryonic state, because the first part of it doesn't have the guitar melody yet. It doesn't have the lead part yet. So it has like a female choir part as the lead part. So it's again like more connected with incantations there than it actually turned out to be in the end. And some of the keyboard parts, or some of the chords, actually the highest note, or the high point of that melody of the second half of Platinum, he didn't have it figured out yet. I already mentioned that in some other podcasts already. He hadn't figured it out, and so the keyboard and the guitar, they have like a dissonant, which maybe he intended originally to do it in that way, but then he actually found a clever harmonic solution for that in the final recording. And I love these kind of details, and so it's quite possible that I'm just saying in a parallel world, maybe Mike showed the part to the keyboard player, and then the keyboard player fixed it. It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And this is sort of like the influence that you would wish a great collaborator, a great session musician has, that they can maybe find a solution to a compositional problem, let's say, that if they are open and nice, they just solve it. It's not that they say, oh, you're a bad composer because you haven't figured everything out in utmost detail, right? So, and I feel that on that level, he started working with people at that time. But I don't know to what degree that was relevant in the recording of this particular album. I think like the next album, Q2, working with David Henschel, handling all the synth and stuff, might have been very different. There are a lot of solutions may have come from David Henschel already. But here with this album, it's not clear what the interaction with studio musicians really was.
No.
And yeah, maybe because we haven't said that, you mentioned Guilty, Guilty being like part of the Airborne release. But Guilty was recorded before this and set set sort of like the conceptual approach, and also because it was recorded in New York, that's when Mike started meeting those people.
Yeah, and it's it would have been for me really fascinating to get an album which had more of that influence in it, but it's it has very this New York sound. I mean, it's there's a Donna Summer's "I Feel Love," almost the same tempo, almost the same BPM.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of both relying on the sequencer line.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a different path. This path not pursued. I think it's probably for the better in the end. But I think it's very. It does make for a good fit. I've sometimes sort of dreamed up a B-side, which would have, like, if you could. And this goes maybe into, I think, to what I see in the album also. The B-side, you could, for example, imagine something like "Guilty," going into what did I have here? Like "Guilty," "Punkadiddle," and then you could also use the ambient guitar section, which he played on the Exposed tour, and that would have been also made for a sort of a suite.
Yeah, and I don't think that he tried to do anything like that really.
No.
And especially as you say, like the main point here is that Guilty had, as you say, had the sequencer part, right?
Yeah.
And Platinum doesn't have any sequence part.
Even though the bass, for example, on the Charleston, it sort of feels like, but it's played. They must have.
That's electric bass, right? There is no, and we haven't even mentioned this. Like this, we're really good that we're giving ourselves time to come to all these things. So there's a brass section, on this album, and there's only 2 other instances of brass on Mike's albums, which is actually on QE2. There's a brass section, and on Earth Moving.
I was going to say 5 Miles Out there with brass on the Taurus piece, but maybe that was a playback keyboard. I don't know.
Yeah. That wasn't real brass.
Okay.
Yes. But yeah, it's really a standout album. It has an incredible mood and incredible sound in a way, like really very unique. Again, like Mike has never made records where people say they sound great from a technical perspective. I don't really get that, because like for me, part of the creative process is also to make something that doesn't necessarily sound great. It's not really about that. Music is not about making a great sound. It doesn't have to be smooth. It doesn't have to. It can have. It can be a little bit awkward or heavy-handed sometimes, and I think that's what makes things great. If it's not all kind of Steely Dan kind of quality, let's say, right?
That's a great contrast. Yeah.
But having said that, I think Mike's guitar tone on the Platinum tour in 1980 with the 10-piece band, that's the band that also played the Knapworth concert. Mm-hmm. That was like his greatest tone he ever had. I mean, in a live situation, incredible. Really, any guitarist who's listening to this and doesn't know about Mike Oldfield, really, like the tone is just absolutely incredible around that time. Mm-hmm. It was great on the Exposed tour already, but then like this next step on the Platinum tour, like the most incredible guitar tone. And in the Knapworth show, which is like a pretty powerful, raw kind of good recording, but kind of I think the circumstances, like playing outdoors, and like makes it even has even more texture. Yeah. That recording, and there the guitar tone is just absolutely like a slap in the face, emotionally, and that's sort of like what certainly, like the title track Platinum, the lead part, that is something that you really, if in order for it to sound right, you also have to use his technique to play it. I mean, playing it with a pick or something, like, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, there's very, like, if you watch the videos, there's very long stretches where he has the pick between his teeth.
Yes.
Very long.
Yeah. And I mean, like, what I love about that time of his career also is where he actually plays again like a rhythm guitar. So this goes to the version of Tubular Bells on Exposed on that tour they played. So the finale, the beginning of the finale, it's just a guitar trio, and it's the Phil Beer and Nico Ramsden playing the famous riff, the bass riff, but high up on guitar, and Mike is strumming just chords in a rhythm guitar part, and it's so incredibly tight and so emotional and melodic, and the three guitars, they sound like a unit. It's incredible. And then there is on the Complete, which was a sampler compilation album from '85, I think. There is a live version of North Star, of Platinum, and also of North Star of the last, where there's about a minute of Mike just playing those three chords from North Star, just alone on his guitar, in the rhythm guitar style, and where you can hear like this. I mean, it gives me goosebumps, and it's just so beautiful because like the dynamics of the guitar, how he brings out the different harmonics of the notes, how he kind of like emphasizes and accents those notes to bring out the melody in like simple 3-note chords, and the tightness of it and everything. Like this is just so wonderful, and that's where he's playing with the pick, right? And so he does that there too. This was the time where he was, like you say, had the pick between his lips, or you know, like in his hand, and sort of like. He doesn't do the hybrid picking, which is like people do nowadays, right? Like with fingers and pick and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that he said something about the recording quality or the sound quality of his albums. I think it sounds good, definitely. Let's put it this way, I've never ever listened to one of his albums and thought, the sound is an issue. I do think the mixing of Platinum, at least like for example the finale, something about it has always bothered me. And when I listen to the live version, I can see what it is. And I think, for example, if you take North Star, when the choir comes in, that's one of the highlight moments of that piece. But then the rest of the band join in with the guitar, and then the choir goes back. So it's a very balanced sound. It's I think it's very balanced and clean, but I think this piece is an emotional. It builds up to something more suspenseful, I think. And in the live versions, everything everything's at the same time. The vocals come in, like there's a choir or a vocal section. The instruments come in. Sometimes there's more bass oomph coming also from underneath with some synths. And I just think that's the way he really wanted it to sound like, but for some reason it wasn't done in the mix.
Yes, it's possible. I mean, the bass synth is clearly there in the studio version. Like I said, it's always the pickup note into the section is the bass synth. I agree. And I mean, it's kind of like a wacky choice, even like to have the congas and like the rhythm.
Santana. Sometimes it's somehow within Santana territory.
But if you think about it, I think that like the beginning of North Star on the album is one of the coolest sounding sections of music ever. Just the way that he plays those rhythm guitars and layers those rhythm guitars with just the kick drum. Right, it's just so incredibly cool, and that's like that. That's the sound that draws you in, and then like he has a lot of like double speed stuff on that, like the mandolins in the background and stuff, which sound almost like a synth there. So they're not, but I do recommend that he did a sort of like a remix of North Star on the deluxe edition, which is kind of like also a wacky rearrangement of the chords sometimes, which is. At first I didn't like, but I think it's kind of like done in a very cool and free and open-hearted way. But the mix is different, and things sound drier. And it's kind of a funny thing to hear. And then there's also on the album Tubular Beats, which has version of North, like a techno version of North Down. It's not really a techno, like a dance version, which brings out the strummed funky chordal guitar that is in the original version on the album, but it's too quiet. You don't hear it that well. And there, like you can hear this element really brought to the fore, and it's yeah.
I think generally the thing is with Platinum is he mentioned that's one of the few things he actually does mention about the recording in the book, is that he was proud when he was working in the studio with all these established engineers. He was proud that they respected him as a producer, sort of producer artist. That he was able to, that he knew how the machines worked and what they could do, that he could actually do lots of the things himself. And I think Platinum is really a studio creation, even though it came in a time when he was touring and playing live, and there was so much coming from the live experience. It's really a studio creation. And the transitions between the pieces are very different on the studio version as they were live.
Yes.
And this is just a matter of personal preference. I just like the live transitions just a little bit better.
Yeah.
Even though I have nothing against radical transitions. I love Music from the Balcony, which probably has the most jarring.
But I know what you mean. In the case of Platinum, it's different performances, different productions, then spliced together. You know, like I just remembered that I did make a podcast with Hansford Rowe, who is credited as a bass player on Platinum. I don't know which part he played there. But he was certainly the bass player in the 79 and in the 1980 band, 79 and 80 band, and so this is kind of like fascinating to me also, because you just said that Mike was happy that he was being respected or accepted. So Hansford Rowe said to me that they at the time, the musicians that worked with him, really had no idea what they were doing there in terms of, let's say, cultural importance, or like what kind of emotional wave that music would create. Like, I mean, we are fanboys, so for us, obviously, it's important, but like he as a musician, he kind of like now, like 40 years later, he said to me, Markus, we simply had no idea, and I wish I had been more present and soaked it up more. And so, you know, because that was just unbelievable and like unrepeated. Like those tours, that kind of band, that kind of sound, it was a once in a lifetime thing, and a lot of people there, and like Hansford said, like a big part of that was drugs. That drugs made that difficult.
Wow.
But anyway, I think also without the drugs, it's difficult, like in the here and now, to get a sense of the importance. Importance is a strange word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right? Like the wave that you're sending out. Sometimes you just have no idea.
I think I saw I mentioned jazz rock and how this is not jazz rock, but when you watch some of the Miles Davis performances from his Electric era, sort of pieces bleed into each other, and it's all one. He manages in the live situation to make one thing out of so many different things, and the Mike Oldfield performances have something like this too. He doesn't make these like in the classical concerts where you clap between pieces. No, it flows from one into the other, and sometimes he will truncate something and then.
Hey, interesting enough, like I think like if there's anything that compared to that, it was Frank Zappa. Interesting enough, even though you would say like musically it's like two completely different worlds, but no, there is really a big overlap. Interestingly, with Pekka Pohjola also, like Pekka Pohjola, who was sort of, I think that there was a, I don't know if it was a friendship, but certainly big respect between Frank Zappa and Pekka Pohjola. And so there was even like an even connection into that sort of world.
When did you see Mike Oldfield for the first time? When was
in
this?
82.
82. So that falls right into the middle of this sort of extended period of
touring. Yes,
yeah.
yes, yeah. I saw him in 82 and in 84.
In Dortmund, right?
In Essen in 82 and in Dortmund in 84. Yeah, and that like 82 was already a very different thing. This is kind of like really important to know. It wasn't the same thing. It had already evolved in a fascinating way. But I agree with you. Like once you put a group of musicians together that plays the whole of your catalog, which basically they kind of like did. They didn't always play all the pieces, but they had worked out versions of things like that you wouldn't even know, right? And sort of like the fact that it's one group of musicians interpreting Omadon and Platinum, right, next to each other, right, and Tubular Bells and Incantations, and then a bit of Fergus Ridge, right, and at that time then came the QE2 stuff, and like they all these things kind of like started blending, and kind of creating I think like a set of a more communal experience on a human level, but also on a musical level. And then, as we were saying earlier, where also musical contributions started playing a role more and more. I mean, that's certainly after Platinum that started to happen. I'm very sure, I haven't talked with him, but David Henschel must have had a big influence on QE2. And then 5 Months Out was once David Cross was in the picture, not David Cross, Tim Cross was in the picture. Tim Cross did a lot of keyboard arranging of parts, coming up with voicings, and you know, and all these things are just a crucial part of the sound, and Platinum really is the starting point of that. And I'm not even sure if Tim Cross is on Platinum. I think he might, maybe.
Yeah, stupid. I brought my old CD.
Yeah.
Of course, the old version CDs do not list the musicians.
Yeah. That's just Anyway, but I yeah.
It's a huge list of musicians, that's for sure.
Yes.
And they're not very often not explicitly credited for which piece they play on, and maybe because it was impossible afterwards to.
I think a few of the musicians, like obviously Pierre Malin died in 2005 or something, a long time ago already, and I think one of the bass players on the record recently died. So like it's about time that somebody would kind of like collect this information actually, and I'm kind of like scared that it will never happen, that we're not gonna know what's going on. Like in the mid 80s, there were specifically things weren't people like on the singles on Shine and Pictures in the Dark, for example. There's not a single musician other than the singers are credited.
Yeah.
But it's kind of we need to. I mean, maybe that's something we can do at some point.
Could be, yeah.
Or we find somebody who wants to collaborate on that with us. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one question. Don't know if we've reached the end, but one thing when you see the live performances, they made use of the Charleston for a little show piece where they when the Charleston starts, they would serve champagne to everyone, and then they would toast the audience. And I remembered that you, when you were playing with Devin Townsend, there was also a cocktail bar section on stage, and you'd be served cocktails. Wonderful cocktails. Was that is that a Mike Oldfield tribute, or was that completely did that come from somewhere else?
No, that was I guess that was Devin's idea, and it wasn't a musical part, right? It was more the theatrical part while there was no music playing. So yes, but we actually, and this is funny, but this is where it connects somehow. We played a version of Disco Inferno on that tour, and during Disco Inferno, Diego, the keyboard player, he started serving out drinks again. So that was more or less that moment for us. Yes, yeah. But like I think this aspect of humor and kind of like lightheartedness in performance, this is something that Mike somehow always tried to do somehow, like sometimes more successful, sometimes less successful, but you know, I mean, like I said, like when Hansford Rose said that he had no idea how serious it was in a way, right? And then now seeing like what kind of struggle, I mean, not struggle, but like decision, you know, as the artist you have to make. Okay, how serious am I about presenting my music? Yes, so 4 hours of sound check, like the most expensive speakers in the world, you know, buy 16 of them because you're doing a quadraphonic show, like crazy stuff, right? Like, and then like, and how much humor is it? And then obviously going back to Tubular Bells, so at the end you have the sailor's hornpipe, and in the live shows with in the Exposed tour, that was that moment, right? And also Guilty as sort of like a disco celebration. And they had this idea with a we didn't mention that last time actually when we talked about incantations, that for the live shows they had like these paper planes.
Yeah.
And people were throwing paper planes, which is
Yeah.
also a great idea, you know. Yeah, but anyway, like it's really maybe, yeah, in a way Platinum is also like a humoristic.
I mean, obviously, Punkadiddle, that was I mean, I don't find it that funny, but
No,
it's
it's not a
supposed
funny
to be a take on punk.
And you know, like, and I told you already at some point earlier in this series that actually I have a performance of Punkadiddle on acoustic guitar. And it really does sound like the origin of the piece is the acoustic guitar piece and not the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, that is actually a great piece, and it's made to sound garish, but it's actually a beautiful piece.
Yeah. Yeah, and the idea with the sample, like the whatever that is, the audience cheering, it's just amazing. It's so tongue in cheek, and also another, you know, the drum beat is sampled on that, looped on the record, and then you have the samples that they are throwing in on top. I think it's so cool. And like the another association I had, and that also my mother and I had back in the day listening to the piece, is that it was sort of like the already kind of like foreshadowing his love with Spain. So because it has that sort of like that arena vibe of like, let's say, like not the nice thing, like the bullfighting or something. It sounds like it could be sort of like a tune, like a hymn-like tune played at a sports event. With people cheering, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what can happen to not him, but really, but the track Portsmouth is sort of like used in football, right?
Yeah.
In English football, like as a hymn and like these things. But anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some of the best interviews from that time also for Spanish TV. It's interesting that he connects, and they connect with him in a completely different way. When you listen to the BBC interviews, it's so different, and he's so much more relaxed.
Well, I don't know if he's really relaxed, but but it's wonderful. Like you can see how he, like the first response always like in his face is what stupid question is that, and then like he meets that with humbleness, then, you know, and by giving an honest and how should I say this, like really from the heart, like trying to connect with the person and trying to explain things. And I mean, this is another thing where you can see that I still believe that one thing that kind of, if you even want to say that kind of like happened to him, is that he didn't really, at least at a certain point at his time, didn't have a lot of people anymore that he could talk with on his level. And I'm not saying that as in high or low or whatever, just in terms of like where he was with his understanding of music and maybe also of the world.
Seems to be, yes.
You know, and having gone through that therapeutic process already, which is it's a big thing, like as you say, to actually face your demons, and that a lot of people never go there. And it could be like my friend Nick Birch says to me sometimes, it's lonely at the top. Anyway, it's not about being at the top, but like sometimes you get into a situation where you're just lonely because of the work you've done.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like, because this Platinum already feels like an attempt to break out of that, to open up, to
Yes, possibly.
have more people connect and different, like a more complex surface structure to the work, so that more people can connect with it.
I'm just really glad it got made, because I think the technological changes which were coming, and some of which are being applied on this album, and then more and more in the early 80s albums he's releasing, they were as much making the process easier as they were making it hard for some. And for example, Kraftwerk, I read a lot about them, and thought about why Electric Cafe was the album which essentially broke them. And I think it broke them because there was the sound was changing, the sound people were looking for, and also they were drawn to New York and the sounds of the clubs, and they wanted to get that sound. When they came back, there's a lot about Reuter coming back, and then hearing that was then New Order from coming from England, and Blue Monday, and he wanted that sound, but he couldn't get it for the album. And I think there's a reason for it, because I think the music wasn't made for that sound. But I think he was looking for it, and it broke the band. And Kraftwerk have since essentially become rearrangers, like arrangers, and no longer musicians. And they were thinking about it too much. And this album, if he had played with this material for a year live, it would have been different. Who knows? It would have, maybe someone would have liked it more, someone would have liked it less. But this is so. I think the thing is, it got made, and the fact that it got made allowed him to then go down this road and expand into the next batch of albums.
I think the coolness factor of Mike Oldfield's work is really in the fact that they are such products of not of their time as in necessarily the year, but in the process of his life. And as I said, and that's why we have the title of the autobiography, Changeling, how they are always different, but still very much have his artistic signature. And that's why I think elaborating an idea or sitting on an idea for a long time and changing it then, I think is not what he really was supposed to be doing. He was just supposed to do the things he was doing at the time. I know that there are moments where like on Amarok he brings back something that initially was an idea that may already have been used on Tubular Bells, but didn't get used, and so yes, but then those lifted ideas that they were not changed over the decades. It's not that they had to it's not that they had to grow into something else. They're already there, they're complete, and they are accepted. I think that's what it is. I think he always was accepting of what was happening, of what he was doing, rather than, I don't know if it like what he was saying about that, if he was doubting his decisions. It's possible, it's so many musicians are doubtful about what they do, but to me it sounds as if he just managed to do exactly what was possible, right? And that's really also that's the secret behind being a successful creative person. Hey, is this the longest podcast?
I'm exhausted.
How incredibly crazy is that, right? Maybe the shortest album in terms of musical ideas, as people would say.
Well, probably not musical ideas, but it's definitely a lot shorter than Incantations. But I think it's fitting. As I said, I've lived with this album, and I will continue to listen to it. I know this. There's always a reason to listen to it.
It's just great. It's just great. It's also this album is like gradient, right? It goes from one color to the other across the two sides. So it's not an album that tries to create a loop. Like
Yeah.
Incantations did the loop, but here no, it starts on, like I said, starts with A, ends with B, right? And it doesn't show you any direction into the future.
That's true. And actually, this could, I mean, I had something when you said that reminded me, I wanted to say, I don't know if we want to put it at the end of this one, but I think one of the big things which is different for this one is that before Platinum, really, there is no difference between the record and the composition. So I think, although Mike has always emphasized he doesn't see himself as a classical composer, he doesn't want to be in that tradition or lineage. He is. I mean, the Tubular Bells is a composition, and it's in two parts, and one part is on the first record side, and the other on the B side. I mean, for all it's worth, if there had been vinyl LPs in the age of Beethoven, you know, maybe so he would have released his new album would have been his Ninth Symphony.
Yeah.
But it changes with Platinum. With Platinum, I think what we're now seeing is our albums. Before, I don't see Tubular Bells, Hergus Ridge. I don't, even though of course we use the word. I think there is these are pieces, they're compositions, and the fact that they haven't been performed by orchestras worldwide is just like bad comment on the orchestra system. But it hasn't happened yet. But with Platinum starts his the era in his career where he's thinking about albums, and so there's a different logic behind them. And what maybe makes Platinum so fascinating is that it maybe QE2, by the way, also because that is more disjointed, but I think it is more connected than many people think. I think there is it could have been performed as a series, like a suite.
Yeah.
And Platinum also could be conceived of as, didn't he play, isn't there reference to Bach somewhere? I know.
That's on QE2.
Yeah. So, and Bach, of course, did these dance suites with different rhythms, and so there's an element of that.
Yes.
But we're moving into the album territory, and on an album you can have one side with a long piece with recurring themes, and the other side is just pop songs. So there's something different starts because it allows for different ways of making music, and it will definitely always disappoint some people because it's the contrasts are going to be bigger. In many respects, and because the album format invites this, like Sgt. Pepper, it's about contrast. It's about a magic that comes because you're putting together things which maybe could otherwise not be together. But I think that's
more like the idea of the collection or of the artist as a curator of their own art. Yeah, I agree. Yes. Okay, man, let's leave it at that, right? I mean, this was much longer than expected. I mean, this time I don't think I'm going to cut out any ams and ads and like, because I think this conversation pretty much shows, kind of like reflects the organic aspect of the process, right?
Well, remain in the moment,
yeah,
like Platinum.
Okay. Bye. See you next time.